You can, it's just a scalpel blade pinging up and trying to cut my ear off. You can probably see the base of that camera. Now the leatherette, I've torn the leatherette off there. The base of the leatherette and the glue are nasty and thick and crusty. That's very, there was no danger that leatherette was going to come off in one piece. And I'm usually pretty good at doing that. Alright, well I will try cleaning that up with some acetone when I get that far in. Three screws here hold this plate in place. Now this is an early camera, so it has polished alloy body edges. Later ones had chrome trim. The chrome trim, where it's used, goes right round the body. So you don't have a small plate like this, you just have one plate. I was expecting this camera to be troublesome. I wasn't expecting it to be quite as bad as this. Alright, that's off. So out with our lock lever. The lock lever's job is to lock the film advance when the frame counter reaches number 1. This is the release lever, and the release lever's job is to allow the film advance lever to return to the rest position after you've reached the limit of the forward advance stroke. The tripod socket, were those screws loose as I suspected? Yeah, only slightly. I thought they'd be worse than that. Oh, that one's even tight. Right, I need the rewind button off, so I've got a pair of pliers modified to do that job. There's a single screw here that drives the film sprocket on the sprocket shaft, and for reasons of its own it doesn't want to come out. That screw slot is very narrow. Alright, out with that shaft. That's our sprocket shaft. Here's the film sprocket. With that out of the way, I should be able to lift this off the top. That's the bush that holds the film advance, and shake out the clutch. The clutch is 3 pieces. It all needs to come apart at the base of the camera. There are 3 screws that hold the film advance bush in place. That's the door, back shortly. Where was I before I was so rudely interrupted? Oh yes, this thing, to take that off. And hopefully the spring won't spring. It didn't. That's the lock lever. The lock lever's job is to hold the rewind button in until you move the film advance lever, which pushes that lock lever out of position, which allows the rewind button to drop back down and disconnect, well, connect the sprocket shaft with the film advance again. Let's lift this out. This is sticky with grease. I'm just checking the state of the cam on the base of this to make sure it's not loose. And it doesn't appear to be very bent either. That's good. So now I can remove the take-up spool. I want that metal bush out, because that'll go through the cleaner. And I'm looking at the base of the body there to see if it's covered in film chips, and unusually it's not. That's good. Now this screw in the door here, I couldn't get a screwdriver to engage with that properly. The slot's certainly clogged up. Here I'm using the broken end of that scalpel blade. Let's see if I can get that to unscrew. That's better. Lift that screw out. That's one of our hinge screws for the door. There's a matching one at the top, of course. Lift that door out. Now there's usually at least one washer, sometimes two, spacing that. Only one in this case by the looks of it. I'm looking at the state of the door. The pins are slightly bent here, means that probably the camera's been dropped at some stage, and the arms will be slightly bent. I'll have to look at that later. And we're getting down to it. I want the shutter and lens assembly out of the camera. So I've got a tool here which engages the retainer ring. There's a shutter out of it. Just looking, oh, it's nice and filthy. Pop that to one side, that'll be done separately. That's a whole sub-assembly all of its own. This is exceptionally filthy. You can possibly see the filth there. That's not nice. Right, start with the two screws holding the cover on here over that gear at the front. That gear transfers the action of the cocking rack at the back of the camera to the shutter at the front. This is all quite sticky with dried grease, so it's very nasty. Alright, so I've got to remove this coupling ring here. It's got a screw at the top. This is where it couples to the rangefinder arm. And that's so as the focus moves out, as you focus to a closer subject, it pulls that arm forward, which pulls forward the arm on the rangefinder. These are always hard to wriggle in and out of place. They probably don't really have any useful clearance at all. Now, I want to mark the position of my focused scale ring relative to the outer helical, this bright brass piece, and map the position of the inner and the outer when they are level. And it's just about there. And this way, when I put everything back together, it goes back in the correct position. If the focus was correct beforehand, and it usually is, then the focus will be correct after it's reassembled without any further effort. Which is worth noting because if you haven't got a suitable focus screen, it's very difficult to set them up yourself. I've got a focus screen from an old SLR that makes a perfect focus screen to use at the film stage. Alright, well, that ring's uniformly filthy, but that'll be cleaned manually. And here, 4 black screws, they hold the bellows to the back of the front standard. Sometimes these work loose. These ones are a little bit loose, no problem at all. But if they work completely loose, they'll rise up, they'll come forward, and they will foul the back of the focus ring, scale ring here, and you'll find that you can't adjust the focus, that the focus scale ring will be locked. So loose screws will often do that. 4 flathead or countersunk screws hold the retainer ring down to the mount. I'll get these out, and all of these smaller parts that I'm removing are all going to be going into the degreaser first, and then into the ultrasonic cleaner once they've had a sufficient soak. Retainer ring lifts off, the inner and outer helical lift out together. Now this focus does move, and given the state of the rest of the camera, I'd say that at some stage that has probably been stripped and re-lubricated. That's the focus mount, full of nasty thick grease. This assembly needs to come out. So 2 screws at the top, 2 at the bottom. Oh, that one doesn't want to come loose. The ones at the bottom, they're just about a lost cause by the looks of those. They're so covered up in adhesives that they're probably not going to want to come out. Let's see if I can get that rubbish off there. And its mate over here I can't even see. There it is. Let's put a drop of naphtha on there. See if I can clean out the slot well enough to get a screwdriver to engage. Let's see if anything will move. Not today. They're going to require a bit more effort. Back when I found the right tools. Basically, I'm going to use a hammer and a sturdy and somewhat damaged screwdriver and give that a couple of taps and see if it'll break free. It does. The same for this one. And the one at the top of the camera. That's good. you have to use methods like that with a bit of caution, because if you overdo it you will thump in the housing and then things don't move as freely as they should do. Right, we're getting there. That screw holds the bracket in place, which holds the transfer shaft. That is very, very dirty. There's the body. Obviously I've got to get that rubbish off the base. I don't think I'll be doing anything with the leatherettes on this camera. That doesn't really have any Zeiss bumps. It's got a few marks and knocks and bits, scratches, but that's fine. So let's start with this front assembly here, and I should be able to wriggle this shutter release component out of position. But it doesn't want to. There it is. This is a real troublesome component. Oh, it's loose too. This one's damaged, that's why it won't come out. That's supposed to be riveted solid there at this point. Otherwise it's inclined to flap a bit, and it's very hard to get a proper setting for the point at which the shutter and the film advance release at the same time. So that'll have to be dealt to. Let's get this apart. This is why the front door was so stiff to open. There's our two springs. There's the two pins. The housing itself, you can see that filthy yellowy brown grease and all that dirt in there. That's all got to come out. And this piece, which is the front standard, there's a return spring for the shutter release finger, I call this piece here. This is stiff. That doesn't move as freely as it should do. Might just be dirt and corrosion. Might actually be bent. Yeah, it's bent. That's a shim. Looking at this finger here, I can see that it should be nice and square, but it's actually bent down. It's pointing down a bit at the end. Now it can't get to the stage where it's pointing down by accident. That goes against all reason. Someone has to actually bend that down. It could get bent up if it was forced in the appropriate way, but it can only get bent down if somebody's gone out of their way to bend it. So there are probably marks on here from where they got their pliers on there or screwdriver and gave that little nudge. That'll have to be straightened up so that it moves smoothly on the guides. So, what do we got here? I'll zoom you out a wee bit. Good collection of filthy parts. And I've got to start cleaning all this stuff up and hopefully make a good camera out of it at the end of the day. Not necessarily this day.